Some time at the beach can be a great way to spend an afternoon, but you have to take the bad with the good. And if you're a beachgoer, you know that plenty of junk can wash up on the shores. Sometimes, though, there among the usual clots of seaweed and trash, the gentle tides will deposit something truly weird. If you've ever wondered what it would be like to wander into a surreal comedy, try putting yourself in the flip-flops of the people that have stumbled upon these finds, the strangest things to ever wash ashore. Myrtle Beach, South Carolina is a favorite tourist destination, and its miles of beaches accommodate nearly 100,000 visitors a year. But 7-year-old Foster Frazier wasn't interested in lounging around the beach during his stay. Being an enormous fan of anything having to do with sharks, he was digging along a stream bed looking for teeth when he made the kind of find that would make a marine archaeologist green with envy. Young Foster dug up a 5-inch tooth bigger than his fist, which once belonged to a 50-foot terror of the seas, the megalodon shark, which has been extinct for 2.5 million years. Foster's parents at first took the tooth to be a sand-covered rock, but further inspection left them speechless, as Foster had stumbled across a specimen that often eludes even professional deep-sea fossil hunters. Even more strangely, the boy had previously told his parents that he would one day find such a tooth, and that God would tell him where to find it. So either Foster made a really lucky guess, or he has a direct line to the Almighty. The coasts of the Pacific Northwest are no strangers to large driftwood, often called drift logs, and powerful winds combine with high tides to relocate them from hilltops to beaches on a regular basis. But in 2010, a specimen washed ashore that was just a little bit bigger than your average drift log, an absolute monster of a tree of the type regularly found deep in the forest. The driftwood wasn't measured, but it dwarfs this 6-foot-tall woman and would have towered perhaps 200 feet in the air when upright. The type of perfect storm required to rip this beast from the ground, float it down a swollen river, and wash it up on the shore is tough to imagine. But you may have heard that the Northwest has some wacky weather patterns. Well, here's the ridiculously huge proof. For centuries, the giant squid was nothing but a myth. They were first described over 2,000 years ago, and they probably contributed to the ancient legend of the Kraken, which was common among mariners. Specimens began to be recovered in the 1800s, but the first modern living specimen was captured in 2004, and strandings on beaches are very uncommon. So residents of the Spanish village of Cantabria were understandably shocked to find one of the 30-foot monsters washed up on their local beach one day, in the fall of 2013. Strangely, underwater photographer Enrique Telledo happened to be nearby, and managed to get some pictures of the type that he probably never thought he'd take on dry land. The 400-pound blob was moved to the town's Maritime Museum, where it can fascinate and freak out the locals for years to come. A British couple having a stroll along Middleton Sands Beach made a very unusual, smelly, and profitable discovery one day in April 2016. At first glance, it could be mistaken for a strange whitish rock, but Gary and Angela Williams recognized it at once for what it was: a huge lump of ambergris, which is essentially whale vomit. Gary described the smell as a cross between squid and farmyard manure, but oddly enough, the substance is coveted in the perfume industry, and it's very expensive. It originates in the digestive tracts of sperm whales, who eject it into the sea when they're sick. Once allowed to dry and age, its distinctive foul odor changes to more of an earthy scent, lending to its use in perfumes and colognes. The lump found by the Williams was estimated to be worth up to 50,000 pounds, or about 70,000 American dollars. A pretty stinky way to come up on a huge payday, but we doubt they're complaining. Kelly Gravel of Wales says her family was fascinated by the object that washed up during their visit to the beach in 2015. The large round metal ball was covered top to bottom in barnacles, and they took it to be a buoy, of the kind that washes up in the area with some frequency. They took pictures of their kids playing around with the thing, posted a few shots to social media, and forgot about it, until a friend alerted them to a Facebook post explaining what it really was. Pembroke County Park had posted to its official account that the buoy was actually a United States military mine, a World War II-era explosive which could very well still be active. The news came as a complete shock to the Gravel family, whose children had literally been playing with a bomb, and they went to watch when the mine was detonated in a controlled explosion by the local bomb squad. It certainly could have turned out a lot worse, especially considering the fact that the authorities didn't discover and identify the object until 5 days after the Gravel's discovery. Giant squids are one thing, but an Aberdeen couple think that they found a sea monster carcass of a non-invertebrate variety during a walk along the beach in 2011. The 30-foot animal had an intact tail, skull, and teeth, and while it certainly had a prehistoric look to it, nobody is sure exactly what it was to this day. Some have suggested that it was the partially decayed carcass of a pilot whale, while others have gone the complete opposite route and declared that it must have been a plesiosaur, a long-extinct prehistoric flippered sea reptile, which had long been suspected of having an active colony in Scotland's Loch Ness. The truth may be somewhere in between. After all, it's perfectly plausible that there are a number of large sea animals that science simply hasn't discovered yet, but it definitely looks like the type of animal you'd rather encounter dead on the beach than alive in the ocean. You probably don't associate the frozen Russian province of Siberia with beaches, but there are plenty, only not the kind you'd want to visit to go sunbathing. It's strange to see sandy beaches covered with ice and snow, but an occurrence that took place near a village by the Gulf of Ob ratcheted the strange meter up to an 11. These are snowballs, thousands and thousands of them, all packed in neatly along an 11-mile stretch of beach, and they weren't made by the villagers for the annual all-village snowball fight. According to the Arctic and Antarctic Research Institute, they were formed naturally out of slush, which formed into frozen chunks, which were then blown along the coastline by strong winds. The result? Perfectly rolled snowballs, ranging in diameter from about the size of a tennis ball to whoppers 3 feet across. Nobody is sure how often the perfect conditions for this phenomenon to occur come about, but it can't be very often. One village resident said that even the old-timers who had lived there all of their lives had never seen it before. Storm Angus wreaked havoc on the UK in late 2016, blowing through with 80-mile-per-hour gusts and causing devastating flooding. Of course, the UK is accustomed to such rough wintertime weather, but nobody can remember ever before having seen an entire local starfish population suddenly relocated to the beach. Apparently, Angus caused waves strong enough that the creatures were dislodged from the seabed in vast numbers, then left stranded on South Sea Beach when the tide went out. Some local residents spent an afternoon trying to save as many as they could, carrying them in buckets back to the sea, but became discouraged when more just kept washing up. Thousands upon thousands of the critters died where they lay, and while Angus was responsible for only minimal human casualties, users on Twitter were referring to the situation on South Sea Beach as the Starfish Massacre. In the English town of Norfolk in early 2017, officials made an equally alarming and slightly more illegal discovery. On 2 separate beaches within a short distance of each other, an absolutely absurd amount of pure, uncut cocaine washed ashore in several unassuming-looking duffel bags. The first stash was discovered by an anonymous member of the public who notified authorities, and the cops recovered the second shortly thereafter. All in all, the haul amounted to a staggering 360 kilos, with an estimated street value of 50 million pounds, or roughly 70 million American dollars. It's likely to have been ditched by air or seafaring smugglers, and while officials have been unable to determine where it came from or who it was intended for, one helpfully remarked that the public beach was probably not its intended destination. It's safe to say that if you came across a brightly colored 8-foot Lego man during your morning stroll on the beach, you'd probably first check to make sure that nobody had slipped anything into your coffee. But that's exactly what happened to Jeff Heineman, a Sarasota, Florida resident in 2011. Its front bore the printed message "No real than you are," which seems to be missing a word or two, and on the back were the words "Ego Leonard" and the number 8. Baffled residents crowded around to take pictures with the 100-pound fiberglass sculpture, but they weren't baffled for long. Ego Leonard is a Dutch artist who is known for pulling stunts just like this in the past in his native Holland, and it didn't take authorities long to crack the extremely silly case. They briefly detained the Lego man until Mr. Leonard came forward to claim him, and it took him all of about 8 months to make another public appearance, washed up on the shore of LA County's Topanga Beach. Apparently he just can't resist catching a wave. Although video games have had a prominent rise since the mid-20th century, games in some form or another have been around for thousands and thousands of years, with the earliest known game of Senet depicted through hieroglyphs and paintings back to the year 3000 BC, and the oldest boards themselves discovered going back over 3,500 years. Games are at their very core designed to give fun and enjoyment to all players involved. However, in many games, there can only be one winner, and the game is, of course, more fun for the winner than the loser by default. That's why today we're here to talk to you about 10 secrets you should know to win at common games. Also known as Noughts and Crosses, tic-tac-toe has been around for thousands of years in one form or another. It has been traced back to as early as the year 1300 BCE, where a variant of a simple 3-in-a-row game was discovered to have been played on ancient Egyptian roofing tiles. The game in its modern form boils down to a turn-taking game that is often used to introduce young children to board games and pencil and paper games. If you're interested in playing it on a more competitive level, the first thing you should know is that you have less than a 1 in 3 chance of winning the game if you go second. Given that the X's usually start, when possible, you should choose X. There are 138 possible ways the game can end, 3 of which are draws, 91 are X wins, and 44 are O wins. When you begin as X, you should start by placing your piece in the corner. If the opponent places their O in a corner adjacent to you horizontally or vertically, place your X on the opposite side of the board to your first X. The opponent is now forced to block you by placing their O in the middle square. From here, place your third X in the last unoccupied square. Then on your next turn in the edge square, that guarantees your win. If your opponent places their O in the opposite corner of your X on their first move, place your second X in one of the other corners. The opponent will block you on the edge. Then you will place your X in the remaining corner. When your opponent blocks you on that edge, you will win by placing your final X in the center.